Welcome to XRP Pro Ledger, and today we are going deep on something that just changed the institutional trading landscape for XRP permanently. The CME gap is dead. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon Central Time, May 29th of 2026, CME Group launched full 24-hour, 7-day-a-week trading for XRP futures and options on CME Globex and Clearport. For the first time in the history of XRP institutional derivatives, there is no weekend gap. There is no Friday close and Monday open. There is no predictable price void that traders have been exploiting for years. XRP futures and options now trade continuously, every hour of every day, with only a short 2-hour maintenance window over the weekend. I want you to stay with me through this entire breakdown, because at the 7-minute mark, I am going to show you exactly what the CME gap was, why its elimination changes the institutional risk management picture for every hedge fund and asset manager that trades XRP, and why today's launch, arriving simultaneously with the Clarity Act's August 10th deadline, creates a specific institutional opportunity that most retail participants have not calculated. But first, let us establish what the CME gap actually was, because most people in the community have heard the term without understanding the mechanism. CME futures have historically traded Monday through Friday, with a defined close on Friday afternoon and an open on Sunday evening. During that weekend window, XRP continued trading on spot exchanges around the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because crypto markets never close. The result was a predictable gap. Every Monday morning when CME futures opened, the futures price had to catch up to wherever spot had moved over the weekend. These gaps filled with remarkable consistency. Historical data showed that CME gaps filled approximately 77 to 90% of the time. That predictability created a systematic trading opportunity. Traders knew that if XRP moved significantly over the weekend, the CME open on Sunday evening would either gap up or gap down, and the subsequent session would almost certainly fill that gap. For institutional participants managing large positions, this gap created risk that had no clean hedge. You could hold XRP spot over the weekend, but you could not hedge that position with futures because futures were closed. Today, that risk is permanently eliminated. With 24/7 CME trading live, an institution holding XRP can now hedge its position continuously at any hour of any day through a CFTC-regulated futures contract on the world's largest derivatives exchange. That is not a minor operational improvement. That is the removal of the single largest friction point that has been keeping certain categories of institutional capital out of XRP derivatives markets. Now let us talk about the numbers that put today's launch in context. CME Group XRP futures launched on May 19th of 2025, and in their first year of trading, they recorded $62.87 billion in total notional volume across 1.32 million contracts traded. $62.87 billion. That is the volume that CME XRP futures generated while still operating on a limited Monday through Friday schedule, with the gap risk that deterred certain institutional participants from using them as primary hedging instruments. The 24/7 launch eliminates the gap risk that was holding some institutional participants back and extends full market access to the hours when that gap risk previously existed. The question is not whether institutional demand for XRP derivatives exists. $62.87 billion in the first year answers that question definitively. The question is how much additional demand is unlocked when the weekend gap risk disappears entirely. Now, let us talk about the market maker program that CME filed with the CFTC on May 13th of 2026. Because this is the infrastructure detail that confirms how seriously CME is treating the 24/7 launch. CME filed CFTC submission 26-241 on May 13th, establishing the cryptocurrency options 24/7 weekend market maker program, effective today, May 29th of 2026, and running through January 31st of 2027. This program covers options on XRP futures and options on micro XRP futures, alongside Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana options. The program allows up to 7 market maker participants, selected competitively by CME staff based on their quoting obligations, ability to maintain those obligations, and historical trading volume. Market makers are required to quote continuous two-sided markets, maintaining bid and ask quotes at maximum spreads and minimum sizes for a required percentage of time in market. Let me be precise about what this means for XRP liquidity. When you have up to 7 institutional market makers committed to maintaining continuous two-sided quotes for XRP options and futures around the clock, you have institutional-grade liquidity support during every hour that previously had no institutional liquidity infrastructure. Saturday morning at 3 in the morning, Sunday afternoon, holiday periods, all of these windows now have dedicated liquidity providers committed by contract to maintaining orderly markets for XRP derivatives. That is the infrastructure that turns 24/7 trading from a feature into a functioning institutional market. Now let us connect today's CME development to the Clarity Act timeline, because the August 10th deadline adds urgency to what the 24/7 launch enables. The Clarity Act advanced from the Senate Banking Committee 15-9 on May 14th. The full Senate needs 60 votes. Senate recess begins August 10th. The mid-July window is the effective deadline. Analysts project $1.70 to $2 on committee passage alone, and $5 to $10 on full Senate passage and presidential signature. Every institutional participant that is now accessing XRP futures and options around the clock through CME Globex is building positions during the window between the committee vote and the full Senate vote. The 24/7 CME trading infrastructure means that when the Clarity Act floor vote happens, whether at 2 in the morning or on a Saturday, institutional traders can respond immediately through regulated derivatives, without waiting for the Monday open that used to define when the institutional market could react. The gap between market event and institutional response is now zero. Now let us talk about the price picture. XRP is trading between $1.30 and $1.32 today, recovering approximately 1 to 2.5% from yesterday's session lows near $1.27. The bounce back from yesterday's crypto-wide liquidation, happening on the same day that CME launches 24/7 XRP trading, confirms that institutional support at these levels remains intact. Now let us talk about the broader institutional infrastructure picture. XRP spot ETFs have accumulated approximately $1.3 to $1.4 billion in cumulative inflows. EDX markets, backed by Citadel, Fidelity, and Schwab, integrated with Ripple Prime. RLUSD hit a new all-time high at $1.65 billion. Rakuten Pay integrated XRP for 44 million users in Japan. And now, CME Group has launched 24/7 XRP futures and options trading with a dedicated market maker program running through January of 2027. Each of these developments represents a different layer of institutional infrastructure assembling around XRP in the same compressed window between the committee vote and the August 10th recess deadline. Now, let us talk about the supply picture. Exchange reserves have dropped from 3.76 billion XRP to approximately 1.66 billion XRP since October 2025. That is a 56% decline in liquid supply in under 8 months. The 24/7 CME futures market adds institutional demand infrastructure without adding XRP to exchanges. Every long position opened on CME creates demand pressure without directly touching the spot supply pool. Now, I want to address something directly, because this community deserves a rational voice on what the 24/7 launch actually means. The elimination of the CME gap does not guarantee a specific price movement today or this week. What today's launch tells you is structural. The world's largest derivatives exchange has committed to continuous 24/7 trading for XRP, with dedicated market makers and CFTC-filed infrastructure running through January of 2027. David Schwartz has been consistent about this. The bull case for XRP is built on visible institutional infrastructure and measurable adoption, not on single product launches producing instant price responses. Now, I want to talk about what most people in this community are getting wrong right now. XRP is recovering to $1.30 today. CME Group just eliminated the weekend gap that has been creating institutional friction in XRP derivatives markets since May of 2025. $62.87 billion in first-year volume confirms the institutional demand that existed even with the gap. 7 market makers are now committed to maintaining continuous liquidity for XRP options and futures around the clock. And the retail market is watching a price chart without understanding what the infrastructure change underneath it means. The CME gap was the institutional friction point. Today, that friction point is gone. So let us zoom out and see the complete picture assembling right now. CME Group 24/7 XRP futures and options live today, May 29th at 4 p.m. Central Time. Weekend gap permanently eliminated. Market maker program through January 31st, 2027. Up to 7 institutional participants committed to continuous two-sided quotes. First-year volume $62.87 billion. CFTC filing 26-241 confirmed. XRP recovering to $1.30 to $1.32 today. ETF cumulative inflows 1.3 to 1.4 billion. RLUSD 1.65 billion ATH. Rakuten 44 million users Japan. EDX markets Citadel, Fidelity, Schwab integrated. Exchange reserves down 56%. Whale wallets 68.5%. Clarity Act advancing toward August 10th Senate recess deadline. The CME Gap is dead. The institutional infrastructure that replaces it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If this analysis changed how you are thinking about what the 24/7 CME launch actually means for XRP institutional trading, hit like and subscribe. I drop deep dive breakdowns like this twice a day to keep you ahead of the move.